Hi, and welcome to the Surface Pro 4 orientation. This is a session designed to allow casework and other field staff to get up and running with their device. The intent of the session is to orient you to the device because your work with the regular applications that you use every day, ORCIDs, Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Word, and other programs, will essentially be exactly the same experience. So really, the goal of our agenda today, which we're hopeful to complete in about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on your comfort level, will be to orient you to the device, review the expectations for the use of the device, and then also to confirm that you have access to Citrix, which is the portal through which DHS staff can access all applications on the DHS network when they are not in the office and on our network. We will also, as part of the orientation, be establishing and setting up your Air Card, which is a cellular USB modem that will attach to the device and will allow you to get a secure internet connection while you are outside the office. Here is our agenda. And before we begin, there are a couple of things we want to confirm. Note, you may pause or stop the training at any time to confirm that your equipment is working correctly, practice the use of a certain feature, or to rewind and catch up so that you feel comfortable with the material. We'd certainly encourage you to do that. So, before we begin, very important, required equipment for this training. You should have, preferably right in front of you, a Surface Pro 4, a power supply. This comes in two pieces that you connect, and please plug your Surface Pro in and take the training with the Surface Pro powered on through the AC supply. A stylus pen. This will connect magnetically to the side of your device on the left side. An Air Card or USB modem. There are 3 different providers statewide in Oregon right now: Verizon, AT&T, or Sprint. And so the modem issued to you should be from one of these 3 providers. You should also have received with your Surface Pro an Ethernet adapter. And this is a small device that will attach on the right side of the Surface Pro. If you do not have Wi-Fi in your office, as many offices around the state, at least at the time of this recording, do not, you will need this adapter to complete this training. Also, if you do not have Wi-Fi in your office, you will need to have an Ethernet cable. This will connect to an Ethernet port either in the room in which you're taking the training, or there may also be, or there likely is, an Ethernet cable that is connecting to the back of your desktop computer to provide network connection there. If you'd like to, and you'd like to complete this training at your desk, you can certainly disconnect that Ethernet cable from the back of your desktop machine and plug it into your adapter. The other critical piece before we recommend you complete this training is to confirm with your supervisor or office manager that a Citrix account has been established for you and that 3 specific applications have been added to that account, and those are listed below. As we're setting up, for those with Wi-Fi, you should see that your machine has already established a Wi-Fi connection. And if you're looking at the bottom part of this screen, you'll note that if you're seeing the universal Wi-Fi indicator, I'm circling it with my mouse now, if that's showing up on your screen, whether you've logged in or not, it's going to be in the bottom right-hand corner, then you should be all set. The machine, if you have Wi-Fi in your office, will automatically connect to that network, and you should be on the network. If you do not have Wi-Fi in your office, then let's review what you need to do. So here are the first bullet. We need to ensure that an Ethernet cord or cable is available and that it is connected to a live port. So if you are taking this training in a conference room or another area of your office other than your desk, please ensure that you have connected the Ethernet cable to a live port. Or, as I mentioned earlier, you could also disconnect the cord from the back of your desktop machine and then plug it in to the adapter. You can see a picture below. The second step then is to connect the adapter to the USB port on the right side of your device, and then the other side will accept the Ethernet cable. Once those two steps occur, you can confirm that you have a network connection if, in the lower right-hand corner, you see this symbol that I'm circling down at the bottom, which it looks like a monitor with a little wire attached. And if that symbol is all white, then that indicates that you have a solid network connection. It is not recommended that you attempt to take this training without these steps or pieces of equipment in place. So again, I would emphasize if you did not have those items or do not have a connection to the network, please stop the training and consult with your supervisor or office manager or local OIS technician, and they can assist you to getting to a point in which you're ready to begin the process. All right, moving on. The expectations for this device. This, this era, the distribution of Surface Pros to child welfare staff, represents the dawn of what is hopefully a more productive and efficient future for child welfare staff. And that means, through these Surface Pros, having access to the full suite of applications that we would normally only be able to access at our desktop computer. And that includes, as I mentioned earlier, ORCID's, Microsoft Outlook, and if going through Citrix, access to Microsoft Word and your shared drives in your office. So your K cases or whatever drive you use at the office level to store your work, you should be able to access that through Citrix, through Microsoft Word. This will provide a pretty unprecedented level of access for our staff when they're working remotely. And because of that, it also then raises some security and confidentiality concerns that we need to address. And so there are some key pieces that we want to make sure we touch on as part of this training. The first is that access to DHS networks and applications should only occur through Citrix when you are not in the office. And this is a very simple rule of thumb. When you're not in the office, you'll want to use your DHS provided USB air card to connect, and you'll want to go through Citrix to access applications like ORCID's and Microsoft Word and Microsoft Outlook. If you prefer, you can still, the exception here is that you can still use the Outlook web login. If folks are not familiar, there is and has long been the ability through any web browser to log into Microsoft Outlook, and you can continue to do that if you'd like to. But again, all of these applications will be available through Citrix, and so it really is sort of a one-stop portal for you. The second key piece is that we want to ensure that if we are transferring data, documents, or images off of this machine, the Surface Pro, to the DHS network. So let's say an example would be you take a photo or create a document on this device, and you want to transfer it from the device to your desktop machine or to another computer on the network. In order to do that, there are a number of avenues you could pursue. You could send those documents by email, or you might use a storage device like a USB removable drive, or even this device comes with a micro SD card slot, a very small media card that can be removed. The key piece here is that you want to use DHS approved or issued equipment. You wouldn't want to have a situation where somebody says, oh, I have a USB drive at home and I'll just bring that in and use it on my DHS issued device. It's a really excellent way of transferring a virus from your home computer to a network computer would be to use personal equipment on DHS systems. So please don't do that. If you need a removable drive, if you need a micro SD card, please speak to your office manager and request it. And the third item on the page, and probably the most important, and also pretty easy um, to get one's head around, is Wi-Fi. These are regular devices when you're out and about in public. Let's say you stop at a coffee shop or another location. If there is Wi-Fi, it will pop up and offer the opportunity to connect to that network. But the easy answer to remember is always no. No public or unsecured Wi-Fi use will be allowed with these devices. And so very simple to remember, when you're not in the office, you want to use your air card to make a connection that will allow you to go through Citrix. The exception to this, and many people have asked, the exception to this is that if you take the Surface Pro home and you want to use the Surface Pro at your home, let's say in the evening or on the weekend, you can certainly connect this device to your personal Wi-Fi network at home if that Wi-Fi network uses a password, if it is secured. And so that is allowed. The other thing I would mention, and this will be a change that will be challenging for some and probably take time for most of us because it is a behavioral change, is that as stewards of the information that resides in ORCIDS and Outlook and Microsoft Word on our network, we also, when we are in public, need to take care and precautions to ensure that that information is not allowed to be divulged, or that it is not leaked or made available to folks who are not authorized to see it. And so an example would be if you are out in public, let's say again at a coffee shop, or perhaps you're at court and you have a bit of time before your next hearing, and you want to get some work done in your Surface Pro. That is exactly the reason the Surface Pros are being provided to staff, so perfectly appropriate. However, you want to be aware of your surroundings when you're using the device. Could somebody walk up behind you and see the screen? You'll notice as you're looking at your new device that these Surface Pros do not come shipped with any sort of privacy screen or other modification that would make it more difficult, even at an angle, for a passerby or certainly someone, let's say a family member or a client who is interested in the information, to come up behind you and view potentially confidential information. So when you're out and about in public, be aware of your surroundings. Preferably, if you can, try and sit with your back to a wall in a public space so that staff or unauthorized folks, I should say, are not able to come up behind you and view the information. Loss. We believe this will happen. We are distributing a number of these devices around the state, and they will continue to be distributed to staff as people are hired or move into opportunities with casework. There are, however, some very common sense measures that we can take to avoid the loss of these devices. Please don't leave the Surface Pro in plain sight in your vehicle if you are not taking it with you. So a very simple rule of thumb, if you're getting out of the car and leaving the Surface Pro, please put it in the trunk. If you're indoors, please try and leave the Surface Pro behind a locked door. And at a minimum, when you're with the device, please make sure that you lock it, which is as simple as either Control-Alt-Delete on your keyboard if the device is open, or if you're just walking around with the Surface Pro and you need to put it down for a minute, you can just close the keyboard cover and that will automatically lock the device. Very, very simple. Also, if the device is lost or stolen, very important to immediately notify your supervisor or manager. The immediate notification is key because OIS, the Office of Information Services, does have some ability, if the notification is timely, to locate and remote into the device to wipe it and prevent potential loss of secure and confidential information. So please contact your supervisor or manager immediately if the device is lost or stolen. Acceptable use of these devices. Uh, Valid business purposes only. We have to be good stewards of the public investment and of our time, and so it is not appropriate to use these Surface Pros for any purpose other than the work of child welfare. You'll also note that there is a prohibition on using programs or applications that are not approved by DHS and OIS, the Office of Information Services. And that would include downloading programs like screensavers or wallpaper or a different internet browser than the one that is included on the device. I should say that if you have a business case for why you would need, for example, a different internet browser, let's say Mozilla Firefox works better with a business-related or child welfare-related application that you want to use, there is a process by which, through your office manager or supervisor, that you can request that that application be placed on your machine. But please go through that formal process and don't attempt to download programs that are not authorized onto the device. Professional conduct. Please don't use the device to view or observe or record material that is offensive or objectionable. This should not be news to anyone watching this webinar. And the last one, a little bit of a joke, but maybe it just literally has to be said. Please don't use the device while you're driving a car. That does not mean that you can't use the device while a passenger in a car, but please don't use the device while driving. And then the last piece that we want to touch on for the device expectations is the concept of records retention. And there will be some more guidance to come, and perhaps by the time you are viewing this training, the guidance will have been published. Really what this gets down to is the concept that when we do work that is related to children and families, case-related work, and that means the creation of documents, taking of photos, using ORCIDs or Outlook, that there is an expectation and a requirement through the Secretary of State that those records be retained according to our rules. The key piece that I want you to take away from this slide is that when you are using your Surface Pro and you're logged in through Citrix and you're using ORCIDs or Microsoft Outlook, you don't have to worry about records retention because those applications already have built-in functionality that handles that. However, if you use the camera, and we'll take a look at how to use the camera on this device in just a moment, to take pictures, let's say, of a child's injuries or the condition of a home, or if you use the local version of Microsoft Word, so this device has both a local version or an installed version of Microsoft Word, and you'll also be able to access Microsoft Word through Citrix. If you use the local version to create a document, let's say notes on a home visit, then at that point, that photo or that document are only stored on this device, the Surface Pro, locally. And that means that that document or photo is not on our network, and it is not behind the DHS firewall. And so the key piece is that we want to get those items, those photos or documents, into our network as soon as possible. So the guidance that will be coming will be some very concrete steps for staff to say, at the end of the day, if you've been out and using your Surface Pro and you've created documents or taken photos, when you come back in, do these steps to take them off. And as I mentioned earlier, there are several options. It could be as simple as creating an email and then attaching those documents to them and sending them to yourself. It could involve the use of a removable drive like a USB drive or the micro SD card. That'll really be up to your branch. The key piece that we want you to take away at the time of this training is that it's important that anything created locally on the device not stay on the device. We don't want you to get 3 or 6 months down the road and have dozens of photos or dozens of documents just sitting on your Surface Pro, because those documents and photos, of course, are subject to loss if the device is stolen or if the device experiences a technical problem. I would also recommend checking in with your supervisor or office manager at the time that you take this training to see whether or not there is a more formal process established in your branch. All right, let's talk about the Surface Pro features. Hopefully you have the machine sitting in front of you. And again, I want to encourage you if you need to pause the training at any time to take a break or to catch up on a previous section, you're welcome to do that. So let's take a look at the features of the Surface Pro that you have sitting in front of you. This is a standard Surface Pro 4, just the same kind that you could get down at your local Best Buy or Staples. There are no special or additional pieces of functionality that were added for child welfare. If you take your finger up on the top left-hand corner, the top left-hand edge of the touch screen, you'll find the power button, so up on the top left. And then right next to the power button are the volume up and down buttons. And then this device comes equipped as well with a front and a rear camera. So the front camera, the one facing you if you're looking at the device, would be ideal for use if you're doing any sort of Skype video conferencing, maybe Skype visits with this Surface Pro. And then the rear camera, we'll take a look at that in just a moment, is also a fairly powerful camera that can be used to document conditions in the field. I should say that for folks who are using their iPhone and wish to continue using their iPhone to document, that's certainly also fine. This is just going to be an option for you. On the left-hand side of your device, hopefully you have connected magnetically your stylus, and we'll be discussing the stylus in more detail in just a little bit. I would just make one note here, which is that that magnetic connection, the way that the stylus connects to the device, is not very strong, and I would not recommend that you attempt to walk around in the field with the stylus connected magnetically to the device. It will absolutely fall off. So if you hopefully have been supplied with a carrying case or a hard case by your branch, I would certainly recommend keeping the stylus in that location. On the right-hand side of the device, moving from the top to the bottom, at the very top we have what's called a mini display port. Most casework staff, I think, will not be using this. This is used to drive another monitor or to drive a projector using an adapter. So most of the time don't see casework staff using that. Below that, however, is an important one, and that is the USB port. That's the only USB port that comes on this device. And right now, unless you have Wi-Fi, you should have your Ethernet adapter plugged into that port. When you're out in the field, however, you will be using your air card in the USB port. So most of the time that port will be taken up either by the Ethernet adapter or the USB card, the air card. Continuing down the right side, we have a power port. That's where your power supply will connect, and you can also see that there's an LED, a white LED light at the top of the power supply that indicates that charging is occurring. Moving to the back of the device, we have a kickstand, which is actually fairly well made. Go ahead as I'm talking, if you want to move it up or down, you'll see that the kickstand will allow you to recline or raise the device really to any position that you like. It doesn't just have one or two preset positions. It really will kind of stay anywhere that you'd like. And then if you take your finger and kind of underneath the kickstand on the bottom right-hand side of the device and move your finger down, you'll feel with your finger the micro SD card slot. And that, again, is a slot for a very small little removable memory card, very similar to what we use in cell phones or in small portable cameras these days. And again, it will kind of be up to your branch process whether or not you're going to be using that slot. You may also find if your branch has provided you with a hard case that it probably covers that slot up and may make it difficult to access. Let's talk for a moment about that Ethernet adapter, the one that you're using right now to connect your machine to the network through the Ethernet cable. The Ethernet adapter really is an important piece of equipment, and yet you probably won't find yourself using it on a daily basis. The way that the use of the Surface Pros is envisioned right now is that staff will mostly use them when they're out and about outside the office, and then once they return to the office, they'll be using their desktop machines. If that's not the case, if you prefer to use the Surface Pro full-time, that's certainly your choice. But the assumption is that that won't be the case, at least for some time, with most staff. And so the Ethernet adapter really will only come into play when it is time to do monthly updates. So the Ethernet adapter will only be needed about once a month for most staff. And so we'd recommend that you put it in a safe place, maybe in your desk drawer, or if you have a go-out bag that you're going to be carrying the various peripherals for the Surface Pro in, that you go ahead and make sure you know where it is when you need it, but you won't need it on a daily basis. Let's also discuss the keyboard. The keyboard by default is attached to the tablet, and it kind of likes to snug up against the tablet. So it actually will be um, a little bit attached at the bottom, and it will provide about a 10-degree or so angle that will allow you to type. If you desire it, however, you can just press down at the top of the keyboard, and that will allow the keyboard to go flat. So if you want to practice that now, and that's an option for you for folks who just want a different angle when they're typing. I should also mention the touchpad at the bottom of the keyboard. In just a moment, I'm gonna actually have you log into this device, and we're going to be going around together and kind of doing a couple of actions just to orient ourselves to the Surface Pro. And when I'm talking about that, I want to make sure we're on the same page about the touchpad at the bottom of the keyboard. The touchpad essentially is the mouse, and just to be clear, the left-hand side of the touchpad is the left mouse button, and the right-hand side, and specifically the right-hand bottom corner, the right bottom corner, is the right mouse button. So in a moment, when we're navigating around and I say, oh, let's go ahead and left-click there or right-click there, that's what I mean. Left-hand side is the left mouse button, right corner, right bottom corner is the right mouse button. The other thing I would mention with the Surface Pro is that it does have a full touch screen. So you have a number of ways that you can interact with this device through the keyboard and the mouse, using your finger on the full touch screen, or as we'll cover in just a little bit, you can also use the stylus as a pretty handy and comprehensive way to interact with the device. I would also mention briefly, there are a couple of things that were not included in the standard Surface Pro package that was sent out to the branches as part of the technology request. And the two things I would mention that were not included, that are the responsibility of the local branch to provide, are a carrying case or hard case to protect the device and to allow you to carry the Surface Pro and any peripherals that you're walking around with. So that is something that if you have not been provided one, I'd recommend you talk to your office manager about getting one. And the second piece is a car charger. The battery on these devices generally will last between 3 and 4 hours of constant use, and probably more like 5 to 6 hours of intermittent use. But if you're trying to be out in the field from 8 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. through a whole day, it's very possible that the battery is not going to make it. And so we have recommended to the local office managers that they purchase and provide car chargers. So you may want to touch base with your local office manager as to whether one of those is available. All right, we're going to go ahead and proceed with our first login. And again, that does need to be on the DHS network. So please make sure that that Ethernet connection is in place, or if you have Wi-Fi, that you are showing that a signal is present. So at the bottom bottom right-hand side of your screen, you should be seeing either the white monitor with a wire or the full Wi-Fi signal. If you are seeing a caution symbol or a red X, you are not connected. So please make sure that you are in the right spot before we get started. Okay, and then go ahead, once you have confirmed connection, go ahead and use your Active Directory credentials, your OR number and your password, and you want to log into the device. If you are just sitting at the home screen, you may need to use Control, Alt, and Delete to get to that login. And from this point on, or for this portion of the training, I'm going to go ahead and pop back and forth between my desktop and the PowerPoint. So for right now, I'm going to assume that you have successfully logged in to the device, and your desktop should look something like what I have on mine right now. And just to orient us to this, these Surface Pros are running Microsoft Windows 10, and generally the desktop on Windows 10 in this format looks just like many of the classic Microsoft desktops that we are used to with our icons. The only thing that I would draw attention to is this area down here at the bottom, which is called the taskbar. And the taskbar is very helpful in allowing us to uh, pin or unpin applications that we may want to use on a regular basis. And so again, as part of this orientation or training, our goal is to get you set up on your device so that when you are out in the field, you can proceed and do your work with as little hassle technologically as possible. We don't want you to be out at somebody's house or at court and fumbling around trying to figure out how you're going to access Citrix or how to get the camera open or how to find that picture that you just took or where to find Microsoft Word. So we want to go through all of that today. So again, we're going to practice a concept called pinning or unpinning. The other thing I would mention again on the taskbar in the lower right-hand corner again is that here's our connection. Here's our icon. I'm connected right now through an Ethernet connection, and so I show a white monitor with a little wire. And if I actually click on that, then it will actually display for me my connection settings. And here I can see the DHS network and I'm connected to it. If you are in fact on Wi-Fi, then you'll probably see this symbol. And again, it'll show you, it should say something like DHS staff or DHS internet, and that you are connected. So the first thing we want to practice and take a look at is that on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you should see this blue E. And this blue E icon represents Microsoft Edge, which is a relatively new browser that Microsoft has pushed out. They are hoping that it eventually will replace the old faithful Internet Explorer, which now 20 plus years old is getting pretty long in the tooth. Nothing wrong with Microsoft Edge except that it does not work with ORCIDs. And so, to avoid any confusion for staff, we would recommend that you remove that shortcut from your taskbar. So let's practice how to do that. And to do that, I'm just going to bring my mouse down over that icon, just hover over, and then I'm going to right-click. So again, that's the bottom right-hand corner on the touchpad. And when I do that, I get a little pop-up menu, and I'm going to hover my mouse over Unpin from taskbar, and then left-click. And now it disappears. So we got rid of Microsoft Edge just to avoid any confusion. And I would point out to you that another option you have, here we have our old faithful Internet Explorer, and that's what we're going to be using to access ORCIDs and Citrix and most applications on the Surface Pro. You can have shortcuts on the desktop, but another option that you have is to drag shortcuts down to that taskbar again to allow them to be quick reference. So again, I just clicked on that Internet Explorer and held the button down, and then I used my finger to drag it down and dropped it on the taskbar. And now if I want to open that, I can right-click on it, so again, the right lower corner, and then it gives me the option of accessing not only Internet Explorer, but also some frequently accessed or even pinned websites. So just an option for you. If you prefer to use just the icon on the desktop, that's totally fine. All right, let's go ahead and open your Internet Explorer. So I'm going to open it. And yours may look a little bit different than mine, and the reason for that will become obvious a little bit later in the training. But for right now, yours will probably open up, and it will say inside DHS OHA, because you are pointing to the internal. In fact, I can actually go there real quick. It'll probably look more like this. And this is the internal, or inside the firewall, version of the DHS OHA Staff Tools site. And so the key piece that we want to confirm here is that we have favorites that are correctly installed. So when you go to your favorites menu, so let's go up there on the left-hand side right next to File, Edit, and View, and left-click on that, you should get a nice long list of various websites that are related to DHS, some of which you may recognize, some of which you may not. If you do not have this nice long list, then please make a note of that, and we want to speak with your OIS tech. You may need to contact the service desk and submit a service desk ticket and request that your machine be updated, because that favorites list should have been added automatically when these machines were set up prior to being shipped out. Hopefully you do have it. It's pretty rare that they're missing. And what I'd like you to do now is go to Citrix Gateway. I don't want you to click on it yet. I want you just to hover over it. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a shortcut that will allow you to get to Citrix Gateway from your desktop. Because again, you're going to be using Citrix every day with these devices. And so we want to make the process of accessing Citrix as simple as possible. So do me a favor, hover over Citrix Gateway, right-click, and then move your mouse horizontally to Send To, and then move your mouse a little bit more, and then left-click on Desktop. And when you do that, then minimize the browser, and now on your desktop, you should see a Citrix Gateway shortcut. And this will be your option to access Citrix. And again, if you'd prefer, if you're somebody who says, I really don't like to have a bunch of icons cluttering up my desktop, you certainly are welcome to also click and drag it down to the Internet Explorer icon. And then again, if you right-click there, you'll see it as a pinned site that will always be available to you. So those are two options. You can pin it down here and get rid of it on the desktop, or you can just leave it right on the desktop for quick access. Another question that a lot of folks ask is that they see the icon for ORCIDs right here on the desktop, and they say, oh, is that how I access ORCIDs? And the answer is yes, if you are on the network. So to give you an example, if you work in an office with Wi-Fi, because this probably isn't going to be super practical if you're having to resort to running an Ethernet cord to your Surface Pro every time you want to connect the Surface Pro or connect to ORCIDs. Let's say if you're in a meeting, a child safety meeting, or a family decision meeting, that's probably not going to be practical. But if you're in an office with Wi-Fi, which hopefully by the end of this, I'm recording this in September 2017, hopefully by maybe the end of 2017, early 2018, a lot of our offices will have Wi-Fi. As long as you're on the DHS network, yes, you'll be able to use this icon to log right into ORCIDs from your desktop. When you're out of the office, however, that's where you're going to go in through Citrix. That's how you'll access. This icon will no longer work when you're no longer on the DHS network, and you'll need to be using Citrix to access those applications. Let me just pop back over to my PowerPoint to make sure that we didn't miss anything here. I don't think we did. One thing that we did want to mention, if it is the first time that you've opened Internet Explorer, you may get a pop-up. You may get lots of pop-ups, but you may get a pop-up that asks you about recommended security and compatibility settings, and you just want to select Use Recommended Security and Compatibility Settings and OK. You may also see at times that you get pop-ups that ask you about adding or installing add-ons, and you can always say Don't Enable. You may also get a pop-up that asking you about the link browser helper, and you can also say Don't Enable to that pop-up. All right, I'm going to pop back out just a moment. And the other piece that we want to, another feature that we want to take a look at with these devices is what Microsoft calls tablet mode. And really, we want to talk about it because we don't recommend its use. These devices, the Surface Pros, are what are called 2-in-1 devices, which means they can be used as a laptop so with the keyboard attached. And we are assuming that probably 95+% of the time, that is how you will use this device with the keyboard attached like a laptop. However, it is possible, and you may find that you work into your casework practice, that it is possible to detach the keyboard from the tablet and to walk around and use it simply holding it like a tablet. And you'll find, and if you want to, you could pause the training right now and you can practice removing and then reattaching the keyboard. It's just as simple as pulling the tablet and the keyboard apart. They are attached magnetically. What you'll notice, and I'm going to do this on my machine, what you'll notice is that when you do that, when you pull them apart, then you get a pop-up and it says, would you like to switch to tablet mode? And I'm going to say no. And you'll also notice that you can, if you want to, tell the system to remember your response and don't ask that question again. So I'm going to say no. And the reason is that we have done some pretty extensive testing with ORCIDs and the other applications with tablet mode. And we have found that it really makes it much more inefficient and difficult to use, especially ORCIDs, in that mode. So the distinction I want to make is that tablet mode is what Microsoft refers to as a display function. It's how information is displayed on the screen. And it will actually take the standard desktop view and it will turn it into a more tiled version. It'll turn the applications you use into big tiles on the screen that are easier to tap with a finger, which is how Microsoft, of course, assumes you'll be using a tablet. The problem is it also makes it very inefficient and difficult to get to all of the open windows in ORCIDs, and so we really don't recommend it. The key piece I wanted you to take away, though, is that that does not mean, for example, that you cannot use the device like a tablet. We just don't recommend that you use tablet mode. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, the next piece I would take a look at, let's bring our mouse down to the search function, and we're going to take a look at the camera that is installed on this device. So the search function is very powerful, allow you to find any app or file that is on the device. In this case, I'm just going to type in camera, and even before I finish typing, you can see that that comes up, and then I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard. And you may get, there I am. How's it going? You may get the pop-up that asks about location. And the location is fine. You can actually make that decision yourself. You can say yes or no. There is, however, one item that I wanted to point out. My camera, and this makes the demonstration a little bit more difficult to do. I'm just going to kind of describe it verbally. If your camera app pops up and it has this white camera button, then you can just take a beat and or just fast forward a little bit to the end of the demo on the camera. There is, however, for folks whose camera button is more translucent or gray, there's a small bug in the program that hopefully will be fixed fairly soon that I wanted to describe for you. And that is if you've opened the camera app and there's a small white circle that is flashing in the middle of the screen, it's going to be very important that you avoid trying to take a picture immediately, because what that means is that the camera is not focused. And in order to take a picture successfully and avoid the problem with this little bug that's in the system, it's important that you focus first. And to do that, you actually will just take your finger and tap on the screen until that little white circle becomes a large white circle. And once it does, then you should be able to take a picture. For folks whose cameras, essentially software, has updated and they have this white circle, then you should be able to just click that button and take a picture. And so this is I believe, an 8 megapixel camera, fairly good. Again, some folks may feel more comfortable continuing to use an iPhone. That's certainly fine. You do have some control over the settings and features, and you can flip the camera around with this icon in the top left-hand corner. The other thing I would note, again, sort of practicing that concept of pinning or unpinning, is that you can see now that the camera app has launched, that the icon appears down on the taskbar. And again, if you think it likely that when you're out in the field on any given day, you might use that camera, then I might suggest coming down, right-clicking on it, and selecting Pin to Taskbar. And that way, each time you open that camera app, you open the Surface Pro, that camera application will appear and be available to you with just one click. The other thing that we'll note is that this device, very similar to the way a lot of cell phones operate these days, this device uses one application, which it calls Camera, to take the pictures, and then once they've been taken, if I come down here in the on this version of the camera, the little thumbnail is in the bottom right-hand corner. On the earlier version of the camera, the little thumbnail is going to be a circle, and it will be up in the top left-hand corner. So it's just going to kind of depend on the version you have. If I click on that thumbnail, however, now it will open the Photos application. And so as you can see down here at the bottom of the taskbar, there is a separate application called Photos. I can see the photo that I just took, and then if I come up to the left-hand corner, top left-hand corner, and I click on View Collection, then it will show the other photos that I have taken, including a not very flattering photo of myself taken sometime in August. And again, I can then right-click here, and I can pin that application to the taskbar as well. So that way I have access to my camera and to any photos that I've taken. I can then use this collection feature. I can multi-select images if I want to, and I can attach them, for example, to an email to send them. Or I can delete them as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that, both the applications, and just return to the desktop. And now, I think we'll take a moment and we'll talk, excuse me, we'll talk a little bit about the stylus. So the stylus, if you could reach on the left-hand side of your device, hopefully you have the stylus attached magnetically. Go ahead and pick it up, and you'll see that there is a button on the top of the stylus. And of course, again, I'm describing this verbally to you. I'm not showing you the stylus that I'm holding in my hand. You'll have to take my word for it. But go ahead and click on the button at the top of the stylus and hold it down for about 3 to 5 seconds. And what you should begin to see is that a light will flash at the top of the stylus on the opposite side from the clip. You'll see a little light start to flash. So the stylus has now woken up. The stylus uses a small internal battery for its power, so it doesn't charge off the device. It uses a quadruple A battery, removable, that can be accessed just by twisting the top part, where the clip is, away from the sort of more steel bottom part. The stylus will also put itself to sleep. You don't have to turn it off. After about 10 minutes or so of inactivity, the stylus will just go back into an inactive state. But as long as we've got that flashing light, we should be good to go. So we're going to discuss the two, what you might call use cases for the stylus. I wish I could tell you at the time of this training that one of those use cases would be the signing of electronic forms, which would clearly make the stylus a pretty indispensable piece of equipment for these Surface Pros. Unfortunately, we're just not there yet as an agency, and so we don't yet have the ability to do electronic form signature, hopefully in the future, maybe in the near future. For right now, however, the stylus really has two uses. The number one is it really is a very competent device for moving around or navigating around the Surface Pro if you don't want to use your finger on the touch screen. So for example, if I take my stylus and I just press on the screen, I can move this icon around. I can open by tapping just like I would my finger. I can open any option, and I can move around the device. I can check boxes. I can open expandos. I can open and close programs. And a lot of people will find and I'd certainly encourage you to try it out as you begin using your device to determine whether it works for you. They'll find that they liked interacting with the Surface Pro with the stylus as opposed to using the mouse on the touchpad or their fingers. So certainly an option there. The other option that we have for the stylus is with regard to handwriting. And so let's go down to the search function, and I'm going to type in Word. And what will come up is Microsoft Word 2016. I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter on the keyboard, and that will launch Word. I've already opened Word before, so I don't get a pop-up, but you may get a pop-up that says, hey, would you like to know what's new in Microsoft Word? And you can just close that. And then we're going to go ahead and open a blank document in the upper left. So hopefully you're here with me. You have a blank document on your screen. And there are sort of two ways that you can interact with the stylus. The first is you can actually just write on the screen. Right? And you could take notes. And again, as we discussed earlier, you can separate the keyboard from the tablet, and you can turn this tablet and it will auto rotate so to more of like a portrait mode, whereas right now we're in a landscape mode. And you could hold this like a piece of paper and you could just take notes electronically using your handwriting. And kind of neat, if you make a mistake, flip and go ahead and practice this. Flip the stylus over and use the top part of the stylus and use it just like an eraser. You kind of have to press on the screen a little bit, but it will, in fact, erase what you have written. Kind of neat. So go ahead and play with that for a moment. If you need to pause the training, that's totally fine. The other thing, the other feature I want to show you with this is that, and a lot of people say this, is like, yeah, that's nice. I can take my handwriting, which maybe is good, maybe isn't so good, and I can record it electronically. But gosh, I can do that on a piece of paper. I'm not sure what this really gives me. But it would be nice if I could take my handwriting and I could turn it into text as I wrote, right? That would be potentially quite nice. So this machine does do that, and let me show you how that works. So go ahead and make sure that you have a cursor blinking on your Microsoft Word document. And then down in the bottom right-hand corner, next to the time and date, you'll see a little image of a keyboard. And go ahead and tap on that with the stylus. You can't use your finger. It actually knows whether you're using the stylus or not. Go ahead and tap on it with the stylus. And what you should get then is a black line along the bottom of the screen, similar to what I have right now. And then if you write on that black line, you should see that it takes your handwriting and it makes a good faith effort, I would say, to turn your handwriting into text. Now, as you can see in my example, my handwriting is not great, and it kind of did a okay job. It really got a little confused with R, and it translated it as ah me or ah me. So the technology obviously it's gonna struggle a bit if the handwriting is a little sloppy, but it is an option. The other thing I've mentioned here is, as you can see, I can probably get 5 or 6 words on a line, but I'm not nearly done with the line. If I want to add additional space to write, then I can use this icon here, and it will just clear off this area down at the bottom and allow me to keep writing on the same line. If I want to move down a line, then I can use the return icon. And if I want to move this writing space around the screen, if I don't want it down here on the bottom, then I can undock it and then use my mouse or even my finger or a stylus to move it around the screen to where I want it. So this is an option. I would certainly encourage, I'm going to close that keyboard, and then I'm also going to close the Microsoft Word document. And again, if you want to pause the training and kind of play around with that, I'd certainly invite you to do that. So again, that's an option for you. It's totally up to you whether you do that. A lot of people that I have trained have remarked that that's nice and everything, but it's hard to imagine keeping up with a conversation when they're out in the field. It's hard to imagine um, that adding a huge amount of benefit. So the other thing I'd mention with the stylus is, they are fairly expensive to replace. They're about $100 for a replacement. If you make a good faith effort to use the stylus for a couple of weeks or a month, and you just really don't find it adding a lot of value to your daily practice, why don't you go ahead and just put it away? Put it in your desk drawer, put it in your carry-on bag, and then eventually, hopefully, maybe in the near future, when we have the ability to do electronic signature, it will take on some added utility. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint and we'll take a look and make sure we covered everything. We talked about tablet mode. We talked about the stylus. Printing. So, printing on the Surface Pro, again, going to be a little bit of a challenge because you do have to be on the network. So for staff who are in offices where there is no Wi-Fi, printing from the Surface Pro may be a bit of an issue. However, as more and more branches pop over to Wi-Fi, this should be fairly straightforward. And I'll just show you very briefly where you can set up a printer. So from the desktop, I'm going to go down to the Windows menu, and I'm going to left click. I'm going to go to Settings, open that up, and then I'm going to go over to Devices, and Printers and Scanners is the top option. And then if I click, and I'm not going to go all the way through this process, and I wouldn't recommend that you do it at this moment either, but it will show you, since we are on the network, it will show you a list of all of the available printers that are on the network at the location where you're at, and then you can add one through this process. If you need to add a printer at another DHS office, you would need to go through the traditional DHS printers website. All right, so we have gone through the features of the Surface Pro. We have added the Citrix Gateway shortcut to our desktop, and that's going to be our key to getting into Citrix every day when we're out in the field. And we've also added a couple of icons down at the bottom for the camera and the Photos app if we are out and about and we need to take some photos. We've also talked about the Orchids icon. That'll work when you're at the office on the network. That will not work when you're out in the field, so just to be aware of that. Okay, so the other thing I would mention is the battery. And again, the battery is unlikely to make it through a full day on a single charge. We discussed earlier the concept of purchasing a car charger. And if you are unsure if you have access to one, please speak with your local office manager or business expert. And then what we would say is, if possible, if you're in a position to do so, in order to maintain the long-term integrity of the battery, once you place it on the charger, if you can, try and take it off once it reaches full charge. It is not good for batteries, especially lithium-ion batteries like the kind in this device and also, for example, in cell phones, to be left on the charging station even after they've reached 100% capacity. Now, we understand if the last thing you do before you head home for the evening is plug your Surface Pro in, you got to do what you got to do. But if you have the opportunity to take it off the charging source, that is the best practice. We've already talked about the camera, we talked about the front and back, talked about the photos, and we pinned those icons, so we have moved beyond that section. Let's see, a couple of tips and tricks. Touch screen. So again, this is a full touch screen. If you have a photo on the screen, you can pinch with your fingers to go in and out. And you have full functionality. You can use your finger to open or close apps, to move things around. Absolutely, I would encourage you to play around with that and become comfortable with that. A couple of little tips or tricks that we have developed. There's a really handy, and again, it's sort of a question about whether or not if you're going to be a power user, or are you mostly just going to be using one application at a time. But if you're using these pretty heavily and you've got multiple applications open, so here's an example. I've got right now PowerPoint, Adobe, and Internet Explorer open at the same time. If I want to see all of my open applications, I can take 3 fingers And on the touch pad, so this is at the bottom of the keyboard, not the touch screen, but the touch pad, if I take those 3 fingers and I swipe up on the touchpad, then it will show me little thumbnails of all 3. Or, if I have 10 applications open, it will show me all of those. And then I can easily navigate to any of those. And then if I want to just return to the application that I was in, I just take those 3 fingers and I swipe back down. So if you want to practice that for a moment, if you want to pause the training and practice that, again, 3 fingers on the touchpad, swipe up to see all of your open apps, swipe back down to return to the app that you're in. Kind of similar to Alt-Tab that a lot of people use on their desktop keyboard. You also have the option of using 2 fingers. If you tap with 2 fingers on the touchpad, that'll return a right click, similar to that right-hand button. And then again, you can always do that pinching to zoom in and out. All right, so we have moved to the point where we're now going to confirm Citrix, your Citrix access. And I am actually going to walk through this process with you. Let me just take a look and make sure we've got everything in here. What we're really looking for, and I'll pop back to the screen for a second, and I'll return to the desktop. We're going to make sure that Citrix gets loaded on the machine correctly, and we'll walk through those steps. So again, what we want to make sure, and we talked about this at the beginning, was that you have the pieces in place to be able to take full advantage. Your office manager or supervisor should have already taken care of submitting a Citrix request with access to 3 specific applications, and those are ORCIDs, and then Microsoft Word and Microsoft Outlook. So we're going to find out if that was successful. So to do that, let's go ahead and go to our Citrix Gateway shortcut. And so here is the Citrix screen. This is what the login should look like. And we're going to enter our information. So I'm going to enter my OR number. And of course, you would enter yours. And then you're going to enter your password. Regular network password. Go ahead and check the box that says I accept the terms and conditions and log on. And when you click that, then at your next screen, you're going to check the box that says I agree with the license agreement and install. Okay? Now, you'll notice down at the bottom of the screen, you should get a pop-up that asks what you want to do with that file. And if you don't click on it quickly, it'll start to flash orange. So you want to go ahead and select Run, and you'll notice that it will actually begin, depending on the speed of the network in your office. What may happen is that it will start to download that file. Mine went very quickly. You may see that it has to kind of download the file, and if your network speed is quite slow, it might take a couple of minutes. That's totally normal, but you should see it sort of slowly marching across, and then eventually getting to this spot where it says Welcome to Citrix Receiver, and that's fine. We can go ahead and click Start. There's one more box to check, another license agreement. And again, all of this is the initial setup. You're not going to have to do this every time. And then I'll click Install. And we should see a little bar marching across the screen. Again, this shouldn't take very long. It may differ depending on your network speed. Obviously, I'm in a location right now recording this training where the network speed is pretty fast. So if you need to pause the training or anything like that, that's totally fine. Then go ahead and click Finish. And in a moment, depending on your setup, you'll be brought to a screen that kind of looks like this. You should see your name up in the top, sort of middle right, and then you may see an option for apps and desktops. I'm going to go over to apps, and you should see something that looks like this. It'll say add your favorite apps, and there's a little green plus sign over on the left-hand side. Okay? So what I'll have you do then is click on the plus sign, and then move up to where it says All Apps, and click on that. Now, I don't have the same apps that I'm looking for you to have, so I'm actually going to return to the PowerPoint to confirm with you which apps you're looking for. But in this list, what you should have would be ORCID's Production, CW, or Child Welfare, Word 2013, and CW Outlook 2013. And what I want you to do is to click on those. Okay, just going to hop back real quick click on those, and when you click on them, it will add an icon on your desktop. If you click on something and you want to remove it, if you click on something accidentally, you can just hover over it and click on the X in the top left-hand corner. So again, you want to definitely add those 3 apps, and then if you have any other apps here in your list that you would like to access, like for example Trips or Link or anything like that, you can go ahead and do that at this time. Okay, so then what I would like you to do, and you can go ahead and pause the presentation because I'm not going to walk all the way through this process with you, but I'd like you to go ahead and click on the link to ORCIDS and go ahead and log all the way in to ORCIDS using your OR number and password just to confirm while we're on the network that you can get in to ORCIDS successfully. And go ahead and pause the training now, and then once you've done that and logged back out of ORCIDS, go ahead and begin the training again. Okay, so hopefully you have logged out of ORCIDS now after successfully getting in. And what I'd like you to do then is go ahead and log out of Citrix as well. And you're going to do that by coming up to your name up in the top middle right and clicking on the menu and then clicking log off. And that will log you off of Citrix. We always want to log off, again, just to maintain security and confidentiality of information. And then we're going to close the browser, close all tabs in this case, and come all the way back. So we have successfully confirmed that you are in Citrix and that those applications are available to you. And again, if you logged into Citrix and those applications were not available, then please speak with your office manager or supervisor. You're not going to be able to be very productive in the field if you don't have access to Outlook, ORCIDS, or your shared drives through Microsoft Word. If you are missing an application from Citrix other than those 3, so for example, if there is an application like Link or Remote Desktop or Trips that you really would like to have added, then there is a process, right? It's DHS, of course there's a form. There's a 786 form, which your office manager is probably very familiar with, that will need to be filled out and submitted in order to add that functionality. Okay, moving on to our air card. We are going to now go through the process of installing the air card. And so the first step in installing the air card then is to, if you are in fact using the Ethernet adapter, you want to go ahead and remove that at this time from that right side USB port on the side of the Surface Pro. If you're on Wi-Fi, there's nothing that you need to do. Once the air card is installed, it will override the Wi-Fi connection. So go ahead and remove your air card, and again, it could be from Verizon, it could be from Sprint, it could be from AT&T. You're going to go ahead and remove that from the box that it comes in, and then you want to unfurl it. So essentially unfurl it so that it has the little USB connection pointing out. It will only fit into the device, into the Surface Pro one way, so you don't have to worry, do I have it in correctly or not. Usually with the Sprint logo and the little lights will be facing towards you. With AT&T, the AT&T symbol would be facing away from you, and the little LED light will be facing towards you if you're just inserting it horizontally on the side of the device. And with Verizon, the 2 LED lights will be facing towards you. Setup is different for each one of these, and so in a moment, I'm going to walk through for each type, just the various steps that you'll want to take. And again, for this part of the presentation, if you need to fast forward or pause and rewind, you feel free to do that. The thing I would mention is that this process does sometimes take as much as 5 to 10 minutes. And essentially, these devices, for the most part, set themselves up. So once we insert them, with the exception of Verizon, where there is a specific step we need to take, generally, if you insert the device and then stand up, pause the training, take a break, walk away for 5 or 6 minutes, and come back, 95+% of the time, you should be good to go. So again, I'll refamiliarize us with that concept of how do I know if I'm connected. Now that if you are on Ethernet, if you don't have Wi-Fi, now that you've taken yourself off of the network, you should see down in the bottom left-hand corner that you are not connected. But once you insert that air card, then you will see this symbol sort of fluctuating oftentimes between the not connected and the connected. This will go through several cycles, and that's another reason that I would suggest maybe take a break and just walk away for 5 or 6 minutes so that there's no anxiety about whether or not it's working. Generally, these do take several cycles before they completely connect themselves. So let's talk just briefly about each uh, vendor. So for folks who are using a Verizon USB modem, you're going to plug that modem directly in, and then within about 30 seconds, what you'll see is that the device will automatically pop up a web browser. And on that web browser, it will indicate that you need to select your connection preference, and you'll want to select the top option, which is automatically connect or auto connect, right? Just always connect, basically. And then you'll save that. You may, does not always happen, but you may also need, after you've saved those preferences, to click connect up at the top of the screen. And then that's it. That's all you need to do. Oftentimes, what you will see is that that question will pop up again. You don't need to worry about that. You could ignore that. Once you have established those preferences once and you have saved it, then the machine should do the rest. And again, you will see that it could take 5 to 7 minutes to connect. However, once that connection symbol has become all white down in the bottom, then go ahead and test your modem by opening a browser and going to any site, Google, Yahoo, CNN, and we just want to make sure that you can securely and effectively connect. For AT&T users, very straightforward. Plug the USB modem directly into the port, just like all the others, and then there's no web page, anything like that. It should take itself through the setup process and should be connected again within 5 at the longest 10 minutes. And again, this is an initial setup process, folks. So it's not going to take 5 to 10 minutes to get itself online every time you use the USB modem. Typically, once they've been set up, it takes between 45 seconds and a minute to get you online with a solid connection. For Sprint users, generally they work just like the AT&T users. You'll plug the device in, and again, it'll go through several minutes of establishing itself. You'll see the LED lights blinking, and then eventually become solid on the USB modem. And if you see the connection become all white in the bottom right-hand corner, and you're able to access external web pages, then you're good to go. In some cases, the USB modem for the Sprint does have to be configured, and so if you're not able to connect, then go ahead and follow these steps A, B, C, and D as they're laid out right here. Troubleshooting. What I would suggest as well with the air cards is that if your air card, and again, we experienced with the initial rollout of these around the state, over 1,000 users, we experienced a failure rate of less than 1%. So I would expect 99 out of 100 times that these are going to work just fine. However, if your air card is not connecting, not able to get you connection, then the first step would be to try and determine whether or not the device, the air card, will work on another Surface Pro. So if there's another user in your office who has a Surface Pro, please go over to their machine, ask if you can borrow it for a moment, plug your air card into it, and see whether or not it can establish a connection. If it can, then the issue is not with the air card. It is probably with the software on your Surface Pro that would require an update. And so that will require a quick call to the service desk so that your local OIS technician can come out and update your Surface Pro so that it can successfully get you online. So at this point, I would recommend go ahead and pause the training, allow your air card setup process to complete, And once it is completed and you're back online and you can successfully get to an external website like CNN or Yahoo, then go ahead and resume. Okay, so hopefully your air card is working, you're connected. What I'd like you to do now would be to go ahead and take a few moments, access Citrix again using your air card now. So again, you're off the network. You're accessing it just as you will when you're out in the field. And please confirm again that all of your applications are available. So ORCID's Production, Child Welfare Outlook 2013, Child Welfare Microsoft Word 2013. What you'll probably find is that you do have to re-add your apps again one time during this process. You should not have to do that again. Okay? The other question that I get, or that we get, I should say, myself and the other folks who have trained this, is I've accessed through Citrix, and I'm going to run in real quick through Citrix while we're having this discussion. I've accessed ORCIDs through Citrix, and the screen is really small, and it's kind of shockingly small, and it's really hard for me to see. So let's take a look at how we can change that, because what we're used to with ORCIDs when we're on our desktop is that ORCIDs you can change the magnification down in the bottom right-hand corner. And on these Surface Pros, that option is not available. So I'm going to show you here very quickly how to make that adjustment. There are some default settings for both Citrix and for ORCIDs when on the Surface Pro, but if you change them in the magnification um, menu, they will be retained. So the next time that you log in, you'll have that option. So if you're in ORCIDs, you can no longer change the magnification down here in the bottom right, but if you go up to the top right, there's this little tools menu. It looks like a gear, and if I click on that, then I have the zoom menu, and I can change that. And again, it will retain that setting the next time you log in. Okay. So you have almost made it through. We just have a couple more things we want to talk about, and hopefully you're happy with what you're seeing so far from your Surface Pro. So again, why is my ORCID screen so small? I can't read it. We just looked at that. The zoom feature. The other thing I would mention is be aware of coverage with these air cards. It's really important. These air cards work on a cellular signal, the same as your cell phone. If your cell phone doesn't have a signal, your air card won't have a signal, right? And so if you're trying to use ORCIDs or another one of the applications, you're out in the field and you move out of an area. Let's say you're in a moving car, you're a passenger, um, and you move out of an area with coverage, suddenly you're not going to be able to save your work. So two things. One, check your connection. Again, that's that icon in the bottom right-hand corner. And then two, save frequently, just like you do on your ORCID's desktop. The other question that comes up is, what do I do if my air card's not working? Again, we talked a little bit about troubleshooting. Try your air card on another machine, and if the air card is working, then you know it's probably an issue with your Surface Pro. In either case, a call to the service desk will generate a ticket either for your local tech to come out and update your Surface Pro, or they can escalate you to the wireless staff who'd be able to try and troubleshoot the device. All right, so the last couple things we're going to look at are just some minor issues involving ORCIDs on the Surface Pro. And again, as you've seen from logging into ORCIDs a couple of times now during this training, the use of the application, the ORCIDs application, really is the same when you're interacting with it. There were just a couple of issues that we have noticed during our extensive testing on these Surface Pros that we wanted to bring to your attention. They're very minor issues, and so there's no need to submit a service desk ticket or anything like that. We just want to point them out to you. So one of the issues that we've noticed is that you can see here in the screenshot, sometimes when you've opened a menu, let's say the Create menu, the outline or sort of an artifact will remain on the screen for a brief period of time, even after you've closed the menu. And again, this is just a visual thing. It doesn't impact your ability to do any work, and so it's a very minor issue. No need to submit a service desk ticket. We've also noted that in some cases, some messages and warnings are cut off a bit. And again, this is just a visual thing, doesn't impact your ability to do work. No need to submit a ticket. I want to reiterate that ORCIDs will not work with that Microsoft Edge browser. We took that icon off for a reason. It will not even load. So just to be aware of that. And then again, we talked about tablet mode. We don't recommend the use of tablet mode with ORCIDs. It really makes it very difficult and inefficient to use. We talked about zoom already, how to change the zoom level using that little tools menu. And then we have noticed in some cases that some drop-down menus, for example, on the CPS assessment when filling out dispositions, normally it requires just a single click. For whatever reason, it requires in some cases 2 clicks. Again, these are very minor things. It's not likely that resources will be allocated to fix those issues, so there is no need to submit a service desk ticket on that issue. All right, we're just about done. The second to last thing actually I'd mention is, again, ongoing care. You're going to get a notification, probably about once a month, indicating that it's time to place your Surface Pro on the network. Now, this applies even for staff who work in branches where Wi-Fi is available, because these updates do need to happen over a network connection because of their size. And so you'll want to make sure you know where that little Ethernet adapter is. Keep it in your desk drawer, keep it in your go-out bag. Once a month, you get that notification. Unless you have a designated spot, most likely what will happen is you'll unplug the Ethernet cord from the back of your desktop machine. You'll connect your Ethernet adapter to your device, and you'll leave it powered on overnight. That's all that's necessary. If you have any questions, you can contact your office manager or your local OIS tech. And you've made it. The last thing I would say is that these Surface Pros are being provided to staff along with the iPhones because staff have consistently given feedback that what they need in order to reduce overdue assessments, to improve face-to-face percentages, to reduce overtime, other than, of course, more people, is more technology, better tools to increase efficiency and allow people to do work in the field. Nobody likes, and it's sort of silly to imagine that here in 2017, that in order to record a case note, you'd have to drive back to the office. So these tools really will allow you to access the full suite of applications that we normally would access at our desktop remotely. So the key now that these tools have been distributed is to use them. And for some of us, that's not going to be a problem at all. Awesome, love technology, totally going to use it. For other people, however, that it will be a behavioral change. It will be a challenge. And so I really would challenge you, try and take this out after you finish this training. This machine is ready to go. You could take it out this morning, this afternoon, whatever time it is you're watching this training. You could take it out with you as soon as this training is over out into the field. I would encourage you to take this out with you every day for the next month or the next 6 weeks. Work hard at making the use of this device in whatever capacity you feel comfortable part of your daily practice, because we do believe that they will allow you to increase your efficiency and to feel more productive. The other piece I would mention, because again, the worst case scenario for this investment, which is a multi-million-dollar investment that child welfare has made in this technology, the worst scenario is that a couple of months from now, after you watch this training and you're issued this Surface Pro, the device is just sitting on the side of your desk gathering dust because you didn't like it or you didn't feel comfortable using it. So we really need to hear, and by we, I mean child welfare program. So this feedback can go to your supervisor, it can go to your office manager. There will probably also be some surveys sent out to staff. We want you to take the time to give feedback about this is what's working with the Surface Pro and this is what's not working. Here's what I need. And that feedback can really help us to focus our efforts. So please take the time to give that feedback when you have the opportunity, and please use the Surface Pro and enjoy it. And with that, thank you so much for attending the training, and we hope you have a great experience.